Well, it never stops come playoff time. We've arrived on this game day Monday from the U.S. Capitol is not where Marco D'Amico and I are currently in the confines of our domiciles in the 514 on game day. It's Montreal at Washington, the start of the first round of the NHL playoffs. Thank you so much for being with us nice and early. Michael, we see you. Brady, we see you. And don't forget, always hit that like button and throw us a subscription. Cost nothing, means a lot to help the channel continue on the path that it's been going. Marco, vibe check on this Monday game day. How you feeling?
The grass is green.
Yeah.
It's above 0 degrees in Montreal, and there's hockey to be played. I think everybody's quite happy with today, and I think from what I've been seeing online, everybody is quite pumped for a team that squeaked in as the 8th seed on the last
Yeah.
day of the season. And I think that they have every right to be. This is a team that could surprise.
So can we start there then? Like when we talk about pressure and everything else, yes, Montreal needed all 82 games to clinch their playoff spot to become the 16th and final team to lock it down. But what about Washington? 4-7 and 1. Yes, 4-7 and 1 down the stretch in their final 12 games, getting Ovechkin over the hump, establishing a new goal scoring record, leapfrogging Wayne Gretzky. The pressure is 100% on the Washington Capitals and all their 111 point season. How much of pressure applies to your thinking when we handicap a series?
Yeah, I mean, the mental game is obviously going to be a thing, and I think it'll become even more of a situation the more the series goes on, right? Because as Canadians fans saw last week
Yeah.
with the club itself, when you're trying to close down or lock down a series, right? It's really, really important to look at, what it is that they want to do with that series. Do they want it over quick? If it goes on, are they going to start doubting themselves? If they start, if those games start becoming like tight checking games and they're
Hmm.
not scoring as much, like, are they going to start shuffling the lines really quick because they can't really afford it? And so all of these mind games kind of play into it. But again, I feel like game one isn't about mind games. Game one is about performance. The mind games come after the fact.
So let's talk about what we've seen so far in the early blushes of the NHL postseason. Now, off and running here. Saturday opened up on two fronts. Winnipeg 5-3 win over St. Louis. Home teams go 1-0. Avalanche go on the road as road favorites and beat the Dallas Stars 5-1. So favorites are 2-0. Home sides are 1-1. Into Sunday, Carolina favorite over New Jersey. Home teams go to 2-1. Favorites continue to roll. Toronto at home, they win. They were favored 2-0. Golden Knights at home, favorites, they win. A little bit of a trend here in the early blushes of the first few games of the NHL playoff schedule. How confident are you that the Montreal Canadiens are going to be able to buck the trend? 5 playoff games, favorites are 5-0, home teams are 4-1 here. Are you the type of person that reads into any of those early trends?
No, absolutely not. The game is played on the ice. People that will say, X team has had X amount of success in the playoffs in this situation means
Yes.
diddly squat. Different players, different teams, different circumstances, and those circumstances and those players can change during a series itself. So, not necessarily worried about it. From the Canadian standpoint, I think, like I said, it's you're going to get a pulse of this series within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game. I
Mm-hmm.
think you're going to
Mm-hmm.
see it. I think Washington is going to come out guns a blazing, absolutely guns a blazing for the exact reason you mentioned is that they're going to have to live up to the season they just had, and Ovechkin getting breaking that record and having to regroup from that. I expect them to come very aggressively at first. The
So
game will
let's
settle
talk.
down like after that.
I agree. And it'll be fascinating to see, watching the Battle of Ontario open up in Toronto last night.
Mm-hmm.
And in a word, I would describe the Senators' performance in that game as immature. I'll be fascinated to see what the Canadians' approach is. Are they going to want to establish some sort of physical presence? Do they want to go into this with a mindset, you're not going to push us around? The tables have been turned. It's Montreal trying to get out of their comfort zone in order to do something, to be determined. Habs legend fan 33 asks, and this is a money question everybody wants to know. The city is electric. It's game day, boys. Let's go. anyone know the status of Logan Thompson for game one? Playoffs is a different game. Anything can happen.
He's
Anything
playing
on that
game
from
one.
your
He's the
side?
starter.
He's going to
Logan
start.
Thompson is the starter. He left the starter's crease at Capitals practice. So he's starting. Do I think he's at 100%? No. But like we talked about yesterday, where the Canadiens need to be effective here, you got to move that goalie laterally. You got to see where that injury is, and you got to. I'm not saying crash the goalie. No one needs to injure him. Like Chris Kreider's not in the playoffs right now, so no one needs to injure a goalie. But what you do need to see is how he's moving, and if there's any limitations, either laterally, frontal, that it comes to any of the he plays more of a, I would say, kind of like a butterfly, but it's more hybrid nowadays. So it's just interesting to see like how he drops for shots and whether or not he can recoup. If there seems to be an issue with that, you can definitely exploit it. So again, this is why I say this series is going to be more of a study than I believe a sprint.
So it wouldn't be a live stream if we didn't get Keith Green's opinion on the game. And as usual, Keith beats the same drum at the same tempo like he's a metronome. Bad coaching, bad coaching, bad coaching. How you get to the opinion of Martin St. Louis as a bad coach, considering what they've accomplished this season, that's on you. How do you see the matchup?
He's not.
How do you see the matchup of coaches, Marco?
Yeah,
I don't have time for that opinion personally. There's a bias. Keith Green's mind has been made up a long time ago. Pascal Vincent coaches the first place team, therefore he's better. That's the gist of it.
Pascal Vincent has an all-star AHL team.
Ben voyons donc. Je comprends.
If Montreal had the equivalent of Laval's defense in the NHL right now,
Toronto. Yes,
they would have won the division.
Agreed. So why don't we talk about Carberry? Why don't we talk about MSL? I would think Carberry is probably the front runner to win Jack Adams for Coach of the Year.
I think so too. Yeah.
Is that a matchup that you can handicap, that you can determine? I mean, both guys don't have a ton of experience coaching NHL benches into playoffs. So how do you look at it? How do you look at that?
I mean, you look at it from this lens, right? I feel like the Washington Capitals have the better players on the ice. Yeah. I think they have more depth. They have 6 20 goal scorers, I believe, if not 5. The Canadiens have a lot of 10 goal scorers, but when, that's speaks to their overall depth from a lower level perspective. When it comes to being able to score in tight situations, that's where things are going to be interesting. And the fact that Protas, who was a 30 goal scorer for Washington, was not helped off the ice, but gestured off the ice 15 minutes into Washington Capitals practice, leads us all to believe that he won't be suiting up for tonight's game. And that's a big plus for the Montreal Canadiens, because he was a big part of that top line with Dylan Strome and Alexander Ovechkin. So to lose a guy like that is kind of a big blow for Washington. You're going to expect them to try to be as aggressive as possible. When it comes to looking at how you match up with them, I think Martin St. Louis, like, with all due respect, anybody who expects a coach in his situation to just like overuse his youth. I mean, listen, anybody who watched the Minnesota Wild versus the Vegas Golden Knights game yesterday, look at the position that Zeev Buium was put in.
Yes. I read about it.
Didn't look really good, right? You throw a kid right into his first playoff game and gets a little burned. I'm not saying he's not going to be great. He's going to be fantastic. Possibly a Norris caliber player, but that is why you need to be careful. Yeah, bad teams are outplaying the Canadiens, but the Canadiens are outplaying good teams. Hold on.
So let's tackle this part here, because last ride went back-to-back comments. So I just wanted to, put up the follow-up to this, because I kind of see this as one of the X factors for me that determines how comfortable I am picking the Canadiens in this series. What last ride 000 has to say here, right? Not so much outplayed, outshot. It's about what we talked about briefly, you and I, yesterday. The forward line combinations that the Washington Capitals are going to throw at the Canadiens' 6 blue liners. And last ride is onto something. Sometimes they look discombobulated, disorganized, careless with puck management. That to me, if
that's
I were
a lack
to
of concentration.
Exactly. And if I am going to put out a list of the top 3 things the Canadiens have to do to be competitive in this series, Marco, being organized with good structure in your own end is number 1 for me on that list. And we'll get into timely goal scoring and depth goal scoring in a second, but your level of confidence that collectively the group defensively can stay strong for as many as 7 games in this series to get what people want, competitive hockey in the playoffs. What are your thoughts on that?
See, the issue is the Canadiens are currently, like, first of all, fans that are looking at how the Canadiens played down the stretch, getting outplayed, outshot. Didn't the Canadiens go 7-2-1 in their last 10?
I get it. Yeah.
And didn't they play 2 back-to-backs in a
Yes.
matter of 5 days? Like, I don't think fans understand how gassed these players are. And I'm going to hear, oh, but they're in their 20s. How can they be gassed? My guys, they were playing 20 minutes a night in like do or die situations. You should see them coming off the ice after games. They were finished. Nick Suzuki was like saluting the crowd, and he couldn't even speak. He was trying to catch his breath. These guys were gassed on Wednesday. The fact that they got 4 days to rest.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very intrigued, because let us remember that when the Canadiens did actually get rest, because they overused their top players, and that's my critique with Martin St. Louis, but it's less with St. Louis and it's more with Kent Hughes. This team was absolutely overused. When you get to this point where you can rest, every time they've been given 4 or 5 days to rest, if not more, they came out guns a-blazing and all of a sudden surprised people, right? We remember in December, they went on a run after that Christmas break. After the 4 Nations, they went on a run again. Why? Because they were rested. When you overuse that top line, it's normal that they're going to be gassed. They're physically spent. They're not going to be able to give you what you want. So the Canadiens will then rely on the easier things, right? They're going to rely on zone defense as opposed to man-to-man. So you're not running after players, which is what they did. Then you look at the way they play offensively. They're more apt to lob the puck out into the neutral zone and then kind of see where things go. They were playing very not to lose hockey because they knew that they couldn't outwork their opponent with their energy levels. This is going to be a different story. And I think that's the little how do I say, that's the little wrinkle that I want to throw into the analysis here, is that the Montreal Canadiens, a rested Montreal Canadiens, this is why I think they're going to be a strong team to play against games 1 through 4. It's just, if this series continues to go 6-7, 5-6-7, be careful.
Exactly. And, as we talk about here on the Canadiens game day, that's Marco D'Amico there. You can follow him on all your favorite socials. We talk about what the Montreal Canadiens have been working on and what we think is going to allow them to travel down this path of success. And one of those things is obviously going to be the work on the power play. Some good puck movement by the Canadiens, working on their drills, working on set plays. The Toronto Maple Leafs made Ottawa play for all that nonsense in Game 1 of the Battle of Ontario. Ottawa took upwards of nearly 2 full periods of penalties. They took 38 minutes in penalties in Sunday's loss, and they gave up six goals. And Toronto scored 3 times on the power play. Now, those are obviously lopsided numbers here. It's an easy question, but I want you to get a little bit specific on it. How important is this power play here to make Washington pay? If Washington comes in with the mindset of, oh, we're big, we're deep, we're talented, we're going to push this young, inexperienced club around, how can Montreal make this team pay for the lack of discipline or the bullying type of strategy they may show us tonight?
How can someone's got to be less selfless. Someone's got to be selfish on that top power play. You got to shoot. And it's as simple as that. Canadians pass that puck around like it's a hot potato. You need to shoot. You need to get pucks on net, and they need to stop. And again, I'm not the coach. This is just an observation, right? I'm not claiming to be an expert, but from what one can see, the low percentage top corner shots that they're all trying to do, not going to fly in the playoffs, because if you miss that, it's going back the other way. be it 5-on-5 or even on the power play. So they need to aim, underarms above blockers. I expect in this case that they're going to be looking for rebounds. And the way that you saw that power play wave developing, there was almost somebody in front of the net. And that's what I liked. I didn't so much like Demidov being on the second wave. We've talked about this already, but they need to have somebody in front of the net. I don't want to see, like, if you're going to have Nick Suzuki play, on the left circle, then Juraj Slafkovsky has to be like camped. I mean, like, build him a tent and camp in front of Logan Thompson, because Logan Thompson is very good, a very reflex goalie in terms of being able to move quickly. But he's injured. We know this. And having Slafkovsky, who, for all intents and purposes, all the flack he gets, really good at deflecting pucks over the last 2 years, right? He's gotten, I think, about 15 to 20 goals out of his 38-9 that he scored that way. That's half of his goals from deflection. So you got to have him in the front of the net on that power play, because if Lane Hutson's shot from the point is not dangerous enough to invoke fear into a goalie, one of the things that Lane Hutson is very good at doing is floating a puck when necessary to be deflected.
Correct. And we know this. Yes, Logan Thompson has the starter's net tonight. Sam Montembeault, obviously, for the Montreal Canadiens, coming up on the other side. Carbonated Turtle on Lane Hutson and Demidov, perhaps working in tandem on the power play. Clearly, these guys have bonded. Lane Hutson is Demidov's chauffeur. Demidov asked his opinion on Lane Hutson's driving skills, and apparently they're quite good. So these two young bucks are getting together quickly on the same page. What's your best guess with how MSL uses Demidov today for game one? And then obviously we'll have a different point of view once we get game one out of the way, but your initial point of view on what you think how he's going to use him. Demidov.
I think he's going to take it easy. Second line usage, second power play wave, and they go from there. And I think, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Hutson, like, loading up your top unit is all fine and dandy. And look, eventually I agree, but with the team that they have now, I can understand wanting to keep a guy like Demidov on the second wave, because you want two potentially dangerous waves. If you're down a goal and you're on the power play and it is what it is, and you it's towards the end of the game, then absolutely I think that you could swap Demidov in. But if it's just regular play, then you also want to ease the youngster into it, right? A lot of people are eager to throw him right into the fire. I think he can handle it to a degree, right? So if you want to give him more 5-on-5 minutes, absolutely. But you're still going to get the same power play minutes the way that it is right now. And on the second wave, he would run it, right? You get the ability to get those puck touches, get in. Whereas on the second power play wave, let's be honest, I think Lane Hutson's the one that gets that holds onto that puck the longest. So you just want to make sure eventually those two have to be on the same power play wave by the end of this series, in my honest opinion. If you want to get his feet wet, get his feet wet. You want to give it to him bit by bit, that's fine. I think he's going to have to be more dangerous at 5-on-5 than on the penalty. And if you start seeing progress at 5-on-5, then you again, incrementally, you start giving him more. That's what they did with Cole Caulfield as well. They incrementally gave him more in 2021. I'm not saying it was right to keep him out of the lineup for the first couple of games, but I feel like you just bring him into that situation and you get there. The first power play wave scored a goal on the power play against Chicago, right? The tying goal, Slafkovsky's goal. Correct. So I feel like
that off his skate? Was that the skate goal? That was the skate goal, right?
That was right. It was off his leg skate.
Correct.
But again,
where was
Slafkovsky? In front of the net.
No, net presence, bro. Yeah, net presence.
That's what I'm saying. They don't necessarily have an anemic power play. The strategy is off. The strategy is off because it's all centered on Patrick Laine taking a shot. Problem is Patrick Laine is being covered so closely that he's basically hugging the board behind him and at the end of the circle, and he should be at the top or middle of that circle ready for that shot, and he's not there. So if the strategy is going to be having Suzuki on the left so that they could do cross-ice passes to either Laine or Caulfield, or try to deflect with Slafkovsky in front of the net, I could see that. But if they're going to keep using the same scenario that they were before and just like skating the puck around and not moving, then obviously they're going to be doomed. But the pieces are there.
Let's talk about Ethan's comments here. Thank you, Ethan, for being back with us today. When Marco brings up Slavkovsky's net front presence, right? Then who would you take off to put Demidov on that line? And before Marco jumps in, I'm just going to remind you of some insight that was shared with us through the great Mark Denis of RDS, whose season unfortunately is over. And they did another outstanding job with the great Pierre Hood there. But when I spoke with Mark Denis and we were talking about Demidov's utilization, whether it's PP1 or PP2, his answer to me was, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why can't you have two power play one units? So, so with that knowledge, right, and that understanding, Mark's with the team, and when he drops kind of insight like that, I think it's in a direction of
Well,
probably where MSL wants to go. But
think about it. Look at the
do you
Washington
think
Capitals.
though? What if the first unit goes 0 for 4? You think MSL is going to be aggressive enough to make a move, make a change, or do
Depends
you
if
go down with the
they're
ship?
depends if they're losing.
Yeah,
Right? Depends where they are. Depends how the game is going. Right? Like you can't blindly just be like, power play sucks. Let's change everything. You can't be that aggressive because then, for all intents and purposes, people are like, he's not moving fast enough. He's not changing. He's not going to do this. He's not. Michel Therrien used to put his lines in a blender like literally every game, and it served no purpose whatsoever except for confusing players and getting chemistry out of whack. I think if you're going to be, and I've said this before, the Canadiens fans are so used to being a one-line team, that actual spread out talent is absolutely lost in that analysis. And I think that's the key. Think about what the Washington Capitals defense or PK unit looks like right now, right?
Yes.
You're going to have a guy like Matt Roy, who's really good. Ferravari looks like he's not going to be playing the first game. That's a huge loss for them in that regard as well.
Correct.
Their defensemen on that penalty kill are going to be Carlson, maybe Chikrin, and then we have a situation where you're probably going to have Trevor Van Riemsdyk and a Matt Roy situation. There's going to be an opportunity for that second wave to take advantage because that first defensive wave is going to be far less effective, in my opinion, than the second. And if you have a Demidov and the Suzuki on your second wave, well, those guys are going to be able to run roughshod on those guys. And it's better to spread it out because defensively, they don't have and the Montreal Canadiens are no better, but they don't have the defensive matchup to be able to withstand two strong power play waves. And that's what's going to hurt them.
When I talk to you about, my top 3 reasons that I could give you to see the Montreal Canadiens be competitive, give Washington a fight as significant underdogs going into game 1 tonight and the overall series prices. One of the things that jumps out to me is, yes, past experiences, and you see it all the time. Somebody goes on a heater. Anybody remember Rene Bourque and his magical playoff run against the Tampa Bay Lightning? Exactly. Mike Camilleri, we were talking about this before. In the 2010 Stanley Cup playoffs, the last time, the one and only time Montreal and Washington met in the postseason, that was 2010. Michael Camilleri scored 13 goals. Michael Camilleri, whose team went to the conference final that year, led all playoff performers in goals that year with 13, and he had 22 points. Someone is going to come out, if this team is going to do something, and do some damage. Let's talk about that. The Montreal Canadiens had 12 skaters that scored at least 10 goals. Now, one of those guys is on the trip, but you're not going to see him, and that's Kirby Dach. Kirby Dach had a 10-goal season right there with Emil Heinemann. Now, when I tell you that the Montreal Canadiens, if they're going to win this series, stay competitive in this series, one of those 12 guys that isn't named Suzuki or Caulfield is going to have kind of like a Jake Evans debut when he was shooting at 30%. Whoa, where'd this guy come from? I think Josh Anderson can be that guy. Who do you have as someone that wasn't always there in the goal scoring, but maybe he catches a heater and can help the Montreal Canadiens and catch Washington off guard? Who would that guy be for you today?
Alex Newhook.
Yes. Oh, people in the chat are still not believing Alex Newhook could be the number 2C. I love that you answered him. I love that you answered him, though.
I don't think he can, but I don't think there's anybody on the team right now that can either.
So, I agree. Yes, both things can be true.
People that want Ivan Demidov to slide in on the center, I don't think that's happening either. The player himself is not very fond of the idea. So
yeah,
right now it's the Canadiens' biggest organizational weakness, and they have to take a look at that. But when you look at the way that Alex Newhook played down the end of the season, he was phenomenal, both ends of the ice. A little snake bitten, of course, could have had at least 4 or 5 more goals down the stretch. But I think when you look at the overall situation with Alex Newhook, he is ideally your number 3 center next year. Ideally, I think having a guy like him on your third line that could bring that speed, bring that element, that those zone entries, I think makes so much more sense with him. And I think it's going to be excessively important being able to move with that speed. You know, I don't necessarily think, you know, that it's going to be a problem. And let's be honest here, the Galley-Anderson line, Anderson can keep up very much with an Alex Newhook. Gallagher doesn't need to worry about keeping up with an Alex Newhook. And I feel like if anybody remembers last season, the Yoel Armia, Joshua Roy, and Alex Newhook line was absolute fire. And those are 2 very, you know, not necessarily fast wingers on his line, and they didn't seem to have a problem. The issue with the Montreal Canadiens is entering the zone with speed. And I feel like if you're able to do that, it destabilizes defensemen. It forces them to back up. And when that happens, that opens up ice. And the easiest thing for a trailer on a line is to come in when that happens, because then you make a pass, head fake, shot fake, you destabilize, you move guys around, you get them to anchor their skates into the ice because they're expecting something. And then you can open up more passing lanes, causing chaos. And I feel like a player like Alex Newhook can cause chaos. Is he necessarily going to be the one to score the goals? Maybe not. Maybe that's Demidov. But I think that he has the qualities right now. When you look up and down that lineup, he's the fastest center on both teams right now. And I feel like that can come into play.
You know, a lot of people are talking Emil Heineman. I want to talk about Emil Heineman with Marco here. And as we look through where the Canadiens are going into the 7:00 puck drop from Washington, how big of a series is this for Emil Heineman? And let me walk you through why I ask you this question, right? Because Florian Jacki had an unbelievable season. The Laval Rocket have 2 players inside the top 20 in AHL scoring 21 years or younger. And Florian Jacki is one of the best U21 players in the American Hockey League. End of sentence. Owen Beck is the other name on that list. So that's the root of my question about how big is this for Emil Heineman in terms of taking a step in the right direction, knowing that the Canadiens also have prospects that are hungry for NHL jobs and NHL paychecks. What do you think about the Emil Heineman factor in this first round series?
I mean, it's always important for a young player to perform in his first full season. I think it's key. But Emil Heineman, like, let's be honest, he's a winger, right? And when you look at the way the Canadiens are trying to develop Florian Jacki, they want him as a center, and they've kept him at center all season long for a specific reason. They're using him in defensive zone situations with important faceoffs on the PK for a reason. They're trying to develop him into that way. You know, only 4 players in the NHL, in the AHL, over the last 30 years have had more 20 goals and 150 penalty minutes combined.
What a season.
And again, this is a player that could have been playing for the Bulldogs in the OHL this season. So I think that those are, is a strong candidate to be a potential 4th line center down the line if he continues to develop. But Heineman, exactly as Dan says, I feel like they would play well together. I think it becomes a situation of why not both? Because eventually I feel like Owen Beck would be the team's 3rd line center and Florian could be the team's 4th line center. And those 2 together, that would cause a lot of ruckus. And then you can move over anybody that needs to play on the wing, right? Like a Luke Tuck. Tyler Thorpe played quite well the game that he played in the end of season AHL game. I feel like they have the quality. They have the players coming up. So when you look at like a guy like Heineman was a player they went and traded for that they've been given all the time in the world to, and unfortunately didn't draw in because of an upper body injury. But the game he did draw in, he was dangerous on a line with 2 very gassed and injured veterans in Jake Evans and Yoel Armia. Like, they were just passing the puck and he was ripping them. But one aspect of Emil Heineman's game that I think is going to be extremely important in this series is his combination of speed and physicality. It was the reason he was acquired was because they wanted that kind of player, a player that can impose himself physically, a player that could get shots off quickly. You know, the release on that kid is just absolutely awe-inspiring at times. It's just, you know, I remember one game against the Philadelphia Flyers 3 weeks ago where he rang a puck off the net and the net was vibrating. It was just, you know, he's exactly the kind of player that you want in the playoffs if he could play up to the level that he was playing before he was hit by a car in Utah.
You are correct, Hendricks. If guys would just stop getting hit by cars. It was
Listen,
one car. It was one car one time.
Someone tell Lane Hudson to make room in the back seat for another guy in his carpool, and Emil Heineman will be safe.
That's it. And a few people mentioned that Mr. Hudson, Lane's dad, was on the eye test.
Yes.
Or
no, not
somebody
the eye
said
test.
Eye test.
It was Recruits. He was on Grant McCagg's Recruits podcast, which was frankly a fantastic interview, by the way.
Okay,
really, really solid.
I'll check that out because some people were saying, yeah, go ahead.
Hudson's father went into detail in the relationship that Demidov and Hudson have had throughout the season. Demidov told me the exact same thing, that they've been in contact, that he's been following his stats, he's been following plays, has been excited to play with him. They were already talking about things they'd like to do together on the ice. And so that relationship, that is the core of the Montreal Canadiens' future, right? But the interview was really good from Mr. Hudson, and obviously Grant McCagg from bringing him on was, you know, the off ice chemistry and him driving Demidov around. I feel like that's how you build camaraderie. And if Canadiens fans want to keep Emil Heineman safe, well, he should never be a pedestrian again when they're on the road.
I'm surprised Mr. Hudson had enough time. I mean, he's got kids all over hockey and professional hockey all over the place.
Well, Cole Hudson's season's over. Quinn Hudson's season, I mean, it was one game with the Edmonton Oilers, and that's over. So all that's left now is Lane, and I mean, maybe he goes and catches Lane in Washington.
Let's take it back to the power play again. You know, and I've seen others. Ethan brings this up, and I've seen others talk about playoffs. It's enough. No pussyfooting around here. You got to lean on everybody all the time. I don't get to say that word often enough, Marco. It's fun to say, you know, like fuck sakes are one of our favorite viewers, you know. Oh, just you wait, brother. I've got all kinds of old timey language in me. Would you second shift anyone else on the second power play like they do with Suzuki? Maybe Caulfield, all about getting that sniper type presence. Thank you, Ethan.
I personally would not. If they use Suzuki on the right side of that, on the left side of that power play, and Demidov's on the right side, those are two snipers right there. And then, as long as Mike Matheson doesn't fancy himself a sniper, I feel like the Canadiens' second wave will be just fine, passing the puck around, skating it around. And then I just feel like the way it's constructed, you don't really need snipers. I feel like Emil Heineman on that line, again, such a strong, powerful shot. It's going to create rebounds. And then you have Brendan Gallagher in front of the net. I'm not saying it's a perfect second power play wave, but I just feel like, especially with the way this season has gone, double shifting anybody not named Suzuki is just a bad idea. Very bad idea, because you're going to, not only are you going to get double the targeting, but you know, you're going to get doubly worn down in a 7-game series. Doesn't give you much opportunity to rise above it. And everybody who saw Nick Suzuki down the stretch, that's what happens when he's tired. I don't feel like it's necessarily a good idea to do that.
Let's get into game one now. Yesterday, Marco and I gave you a couple of picks for the NHL action. I went 1-1 with my picks. I gave you Carolina minus a goal and a half. That won. And Toronto covered the over by themselves. It was an over-under 5.5, the Battle of Ontario, and the Leafs scored 6. So we lose that one. So let's get into game one tonight. Montreal at Washington. Logan Thompson against Samuel Montembeault is the battle of goaltenders from Washington. Now, the Montreal Canadiens did not have a good record against teams from the Metro. Washington did have a pretty good record against teams from the NHL's Atlantic Division. As JGH writes here, that Toronto-Ottawa game was a rough and tumble affair. As I mentioned, Ottawa took 38 minutes in penalties, and Toronto scored 3 times in 6 power play opportunities. Do you see the opener of this game tonight looking anything like the opener between Ottawa and Toronto Sunday night?
No.
Me neither.
Ottawa as a team is easily triggered, I find. You can tell whenever they play against Starr, the whole team wants to fight him, right?
Exactly.
What is that?
Yeah.
And I'm again like no disrespect, but they just seem to be emotionally compromised quite easily. And a guy like Brady Tkachuk is pure emotion. So I don't necessarily see it that way. I don't think there's enough animosity between the two teams to get to that level right off the bat. As for the record between Metro and like for example Atlantic, right? The Atlantic division was stronger this season than the Metro. I think.
Oh God, yeah, Metro sucked.
Exactly.
Let's be honest.
So it just speaks to the Canadiens' ability to play up or down to their competition, and I feel like the Canadiens are the best when they're the underdogs.
Yeah.
They tend to have a bit of more difficulty. That comes with maturity. They tend to have more difficulty playing worse teams. And so I think when you look at a team like the Washington Capitals, I think they'll embrace the challenge of playing up to them, especially in game one, where the Canadiens, I feel, are going to need to be excessively careful is on the 5-on-5 in terms of lazy plays. They need to work. They need to outwork Washington in this game. And that's easier said than done. But there's a couple of players in Washington that are experiencing this kind of setup for the first time as well, right? And you have a youngster like Ryan Leonard who could potentially be a wild card for them as well. He's such a money player in these kinds of situations at lower levels. We'll see what he can do here. But if you're the Montreal Canadiens, right, that top line, like Juraj Slafkovsky better be, wallpapering some guys to boards in this game or bodying guys for puck possession. Like it's non-negotiable at this point. You were drafted to be a bowling ball, the bowling ball.
So the Canadiens scored a total of 9 goals in their last 4 games, included in that, I should say, is a 1-0 shutout, that overtime game in Toronto on a Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Montreal, one of the lower scoring teams in hockey, averaging under 26 shots on net per game. And I understand playoff hockey is a lot more physical. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the way the Canadiens play, kind of skewing towards lower scoring, not an abundance of shots on goal, that it plays to what they do kind of thing? Tight quarters, tight checking, close encounters.
I feel like the Canadiens down the stretch were also hurting themselves in the sense they were going for low percentage shots, right? Okay. So if you look at a lot of their goals, some of them are fluky, some of them are off the, I think Cole Caulfield scored a couple 5-hole goals. But if you look at these shots, like I think the average you said was 25, 26.
25 and a half.
They probably had 2.5 times that in shot attempts. Yeah. The amount of missed shots, blocked shots is just absolutely infuriating to watch from the top level, because it was either due to hesitation or just a lack of situational understanding, nervousness, tiredness. And I feel like if you're able to take your time and watch how this develops, and sometimes take the high percentage shot, right? Like if you aim for the midsection or the crest and the goalie's already in motion, the chances for a rebound are high because he has less opportunity to close up and block the shot. The same applies for pads. It's easier to shoot pucks lower, so the pads create a rebound, and if you're crashing the net, then it creates an opportunity for a rebound. That is a style that is excessively used in playoffs, and in terms of the cup-winning teams, they've mastered that art. The Canadiens have never done that in the entirety of this rebuild. It's always been the beauty setup play, which is fun to watch, but in the playoffs, it's all about the dirty goals, man. It's all about the dirty goals, especially when you're an underdog team. And I feel like that's what they need to get back to. That's what they need to develop during this series.
Yep. The Arbor Jack I love is very much a thing in the chat, and it has been, Marco. You and I doing live shows Saturday, Sunday. Here we are.
We're talking about penalties in the playoffs.
Oh my gosh, it's not a winning combination right now.
Right now, just too much risk, not enough reward. When you have a guy like Jaden Struble who is playing above to that level,
I agree.
No disrespect, Arbor Jack.
It's not.
It's young team.
Correct.
David Savard's not what he used to be. You're not taking Savard out because you're absolutely going to need him in case this team does run into penalty kills. It's just not the time right now, and I don't think anybody can give me a solid argument in having him in the lineup over a guy like Jaden Struble right now.
Yep. Thank you, Matt McLean. Feels like the Canadiens have to be looked at as a season of two teams. December 1st splits, and what they've done. Still underdogs. Matt suggests he doesn't think so. So
That's fine,
let me
but
get.
they are.
Well, yeah, they are. And look, let them
They
feast
are.
on
They
that.
were.
Let them
They were
feast on
the
that.
even from that point. They were the 11th best team in the NHL. You know who was better? The Washington Capitals. So
That's right.
at that way of looking at it, they're still the underdogs. They may not be, and I think I will give that credit to that point. They may not be as big an underdog as bookies and outlets are giving him. I think that's the key, right? It's far closer when the teams
Yes.
are rested and playing each other.
Yes.
It could be
Correct.
far closer based on the record. However, the roster construction, you got to give it to Washington in terms of they are the favorite in this situation when you have such scoring depth and a goalie that put up borderline Vezina numbers. Like I'm sorry, it's unfortunate because you want as a Canadiens fan, I'm sure you want to cheer for your team, but the reality is, if this were simulated, Washington has the better chance of coming out of this. That doesn't mean that the Canadiens can't win, but they got to play smart. They got to play discipline.
I agree wholeheartedly. Some good points in there, no doubt. Reminder, Marco and I will be back here as we are right now, coming to you live at 11 a.m. Tuesday morning, the morning after the Montreal Canadiens and Washington Capitals open up their first round series at 7 o'clock. You can listen to the game live on TSN 690 with Victor Finley and JP O'Connor on the broadcast. Now, this is what I think happens tonight. I think the Washington Capitals and the Montreal Canadiens are going to play a low-scoring game. I think the fact that the Canadiens and Capitals are, I think, going to have a kind of a feel-it-out game. I don't know why everyone thinks there's going to be fights, and that's why Arbor needs to play. I just don't think this has the makeup of a fight, fisticuff type series. Maybe something will happen and it changes, but right now I just don't see it happening. And
there's one player on that team that was still there in 2010.
Yeah, and he had a great.
There's no rivalry between these two teams.
Yes, Tom Wilson is not going to be out there gooning it up. He's too important. He can play both sides.
We talked about this yesterday. If he does, it's to the Canadiens' benefit because who's he going to fight? So, he's probably going to end up fighting Josh Anderson.
So before you give me your prediction, let me tell you what I think is going to happen. I think the Montreal Canadiens are going to try their best to tighten things up.
I don't do predictions. You can take care of that.
Well, we talked about this off the air. If we get what we want, that was going to change. Is that fair?
That works.
So I like the under tonight. I like under 5.5 goals tonight. I think we are going to see a tight game. And I'm going to tell you this other part. I'm very concerned about the Montreal Canadiens' defensive structure, as I talked about it with Marco already. I'm concerned that Washington's depth, their speed, their skill, it's going to be a lot for Montreal to handle well throughout the course of 60 minutes. But I believe they can kind of show us something. And that's why I like under 5.5. That's why I like the Canadiens to win this hockey game and to steal the series from Washington as early as tonight. It's all about planting seeds of doubt. If you can do it, you can really make Washington question their method, what they do, how they operate. Oh, shit, what we did in the regular season. Oh, my God, do we have to change something because we're down 0-1 in this series? I think Montreal steals the game. They play a low scoring, under 5.5. Habs win on the road. That's my take.
I think I can see where you're coming from. I think it'll be a low scoring affair as well, unless both teams start getting into penalties. And then
that's it.
That's a different story. All things considered,
it'll be Montreal though. They get stupid, no?
I don't agree with that at all.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of nerve. There's a lot of injuries to some key players. There could be some levels of undiscipline as well. You know, if the Canadiens, and I've said this, if the Canadiens start the game by outworking Washington and having them follow them, as they go for pucks and whatnot, there's a couple of older players on that team that will take penalties. I'm almost sure of it. But I think the key area is going to be the lack of, significant physicality and mobility on the back end for them. Canadians, the way that they're set up, look like a more physical team, a more in your face kind of team. And that even includes a guy like Lane Hudson, who's, we've seen him be a goon in certain situations. He could definitely, link up. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. But if the Canadians can use their aggressiveness and some of the size that they possess to overwhelm their defense, that's where you can start getting them into penalty trouble. I don't think their experience will absolve them of those kind of mental mistakes, because at this point in time, you're just trying to feel out the team. You're trying to feel out the player. The moment there's significant, like 4 or 5 consecutive shifts of momentum, no matter what experience you have, you start playing with a little bit more edge. And, 50% of the time, a little bit more edge, you end up in the penalty box.
50% of the time, it works every time. Marco D'Amico, enjoy the ramp up and the rev up to Game 1 tonight. Enjoy Game 1, obviously, and very much looking forward to being back with you here at 11 a.m. tomorrow to recap it live, and looking forward to Game 2. And we'll tackle that all right here where you're watching us from at 11 a.m. bright and early tomorrow morning. The Habs and Capitals tonight at 7 live on TSN 690. Marco, enjoy the day, brother.
Live on TSN 690?
Is that what I said?
Yeah.
At 6 a.m. tomorrow. Listen, bro, you've been saying it for 20 years. What do you want me to do,
I hope everybody enjoys the game, and I look forward to being able to talk to you all tomorrow about this.
And we'll be back here live on youtube.com at 11 a.m. But, of course, you can listen to me at 6 a.m. on radio with Simon Salikas. Marco, thank you so much. No, I don't have any swing tips. No swing. I have a golf lesson today. See that lead wrist? Look at that wrist. None of this. We don't want cupping. We don't want this. We want flat. Okay? That's my swing advice. You got that, Marco? I saw you were taking notes.
I did.
Okay. See you tomorrow at 11. Peace.